So the topic for this morning is, what does it mean to seek our common good? When my nephew was about 10 years old, he's in his 20s now, but when we were sitting around the table, and his family didn't go to church, and he'd heard bits and pieces. So he asked this question, he goes, well, here's the thing I don't understand about heaven. He said, now let's say someone goes to heaven who really loves tigers. And someone else goes to heaven, and they're neighbors, but the person who is his neighbor hates tigers. How could that be heaven for both of them? Like, how old are you? What a great question. What does it mean to seek our common good when what we want for our common good is so different? Ernest Holmes talks about it. We heard in the reading today, one of the places to start is always ourself. We have to know that within us is all the good that we've ever wanted, that it doesn't come from an external source, and that it's already been given, and our work is to heal the separation that we feel from that divine self within us, to pull away the layers for that always already good to be revealed. In the human potential movement, it's very much about what Carl Jung calls individuation. It's about discovering our hopes and our dreams and really fulfilling our highest potentials, doing our work not just inwardly as a healing, but also a becoming, as an evolving. Who am I meant to be? And start expressing that out in the world and creating that new life for us, and to recognize that all the good that has ever been and ever will be is right there at the center of my being, and I can learn to develop it. We use so much of our practices as a way to create a world that works for us. Because if we don't do it for us, then we're going to start resenting our neighbor. It's very hard to want to seek the common good if we don't feel like if the good is missing from us. We start to get resentful, things start to come up. I loved that reading today. I put it on my Facebook page as well, because it was so real. It began with when we meet someone and we really like them, we're afraid they might not like us back. And then we get really self-conscious and weird, and we can't be normal because we think our good is coming from them. And rather than just being open and free with our love, the talks, by the way, it's a wonderful book. It's called The Ernest Holmes Papers, and they all come from different talks that he gives. And he's so down to earth. The talks are directly from him speaking, so it's really fun. He's like, I love to tell people I love them, and what are you afraid of? You're embarrassed that they are going to make fun of you? Who is this they? I've never met a they. Be you, love freely, express your love. But if you feel like you're going to lose something by expressing your love, that means you haven't done the inner work to know that you're whole, perfect, and complete. So this is the work that he really gave to us in the Centers for Spiritual Living, is to heal and find all that good that is within us, to turn away from that the power is out there and know that the power is within. So much of our culture has taken this on, become our highest potential, fulfill our dreams, be who that we want to be. And it's wonderful. And we recognize that we are all unique emanations of God, that we all have different slightly takes on what we want for ourselves. But the criticism then becomes, well, then we can be slightly narcissistic. That's a criticism from the outside, but inwardly what can start to happen is we start to feel highly isolated. Because what I'm thinking about, what I can be thinking about all the time is me. What do I need? What do I want? What do I care about? What do I value? And so suddenly the focus starts to become always about what will serve me, and we get trapped in this little island. And I don't think it happens within religion. I think our whole culture is gearing towards that, where we could say in the past there was a heavy emphasis on family, community, church communities. Church communities are slowly dissipating, and people are all over the world. My niece lives in Japan. Jack and I live on the opposite end of the country from our families. That people are spread out. Even my family's spread out all over the East Coast. Nobody's in one city. Now, I'm not saying that for all of you. I know some of you have very close family ties all in one area, but many of us are spread out. We don't have that level of connection, and so we have the connection that we have is dissipated. Well, we have our church community, we have our work community, we have our causes that we are part of, we have our hobbies, our sports, or whatever. That we have so many different things that we belong to as well, that suddenly that center force of connection, of belonging, is spread out all over to the point where we almost feel like we don't belong anywhere. We belong everywhere, but we don't belong anywhere. Does that make sense? Like, we feel connected, even with our religion. We feel connected with all religions, but we don't really feel connected with any one religion, with one, like, this is where I belong. And I think all of these aspects are why there's this epidemic of loneliness that's happening. We spend a lot of time focusing on follow your bliss, follow your dreams, go after what you want, to the point where there is a disconnect from the world around you. What I love about Ernest Holmes is he really did both. As we look at seek the common good, he always reached out to other people. I mentioned this before. If you read his 365 days, I love that almost always at the very end, whatever he's just affirmed for an individual, then he says, and I know this is true for everybody. In the reading this morning, he said he consciously and indefinitely every single day makes sure he, in his prayer work, reaches out to the entire world to hold them in his heart, that everyone is part of him, that he's seeking to create connection with other people. And when we start to do that, we start to find people have different points of view, different perspectives, and that was one of his greatest gifts. He was someone who met with people from all different religions, philosophy, psychology. He met with Einstein. He met with Paramahansa Yogananda. He met with the psychologists at UCLA. He was so interested in everything and all the different perspectives. And how does this all come together as one? And he didn't reject. He only opened up. He's the one who said, wouldn't it be wonderful if there were a group of people who were only for something and against nothing? His entire modus operandi was to be for something, because he knew that there was this infinite, abundant universe that would support each and every individual. I believe most people on this planet want the common good for everybody. In fact, you can look through this Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas, John Hume, John Locke, James Madison, Rousseau. All these people were writing about the common good. They had different perspectives on how to get to the common good. They would have their different arguments, but the intention was common good. I think the only people who don't want the common good, they were all clear that we don't want something that's just for the elite few. And I think the only people who want something for the elite few believe that only by other people not having, can they have enough. There's a deep belief in scarcity and lack. So in order for me to have what I want, other people can't have what they want. And this, is, by the way, is why spirituality is so important. Because until we know, as Ernest Holmes knew, that our source comes from spirit and spirit is infinite, that there is no beginning, there is no end, there is enough for everybody to really be anchored in that spiritual source which is invisible, because in the visible there is temporariness, there is lack, but in the infinite, in the invisible, there is nothing but enough. And that's the place from which we are sourced. The way we do affirmative prayers is brilliant. We start with that oneness, with that presence that all there is the infinite goodness of God. Unlimited, unlimited, unlimited. Our human minds have a very hard time grasping that idea of unlimited, which is why we go into prayer, to allow those words to take us into that state of consciousness. The words are just the fingers pointing at the moon, but to move into that state of consciousness where we're beyond words, beyond concepts, and we start to feel the presence. I was just listening to a monk this morning who was saying that prayer is simply about feeling the presence. That just by the moment we go into prayer, we start to feel the presence around us and surrounding us. And it's something you can't taste, touch, hear, or smell. It's not of the five senses. It's transcendent of all that we know. And when we tap into that and then move into the infinite oneness, into the particular, we're all one with it, and we move into claiming and accepting the individuality of it, then we know there's enough good for everybody. And then we can really start moving into this world that works for everyone, to seek the common good for everyone, because it's possible when we're anchored in spirit, when we're anchored in the truth of who we are. And so I believe what the interreligious communities are doing, the interfaith programs, there's a great interfaith program here in Livermore, in Tri-Valley, to really say that it doesn't matter what religion you are, we're all worshiping the same presence, and they're going out and doing service in the world. And that's why people of spirit who are spiritually awake, why it's important for us to do service, because we're doing it from that place of the infinite good, that we have an infinite abundance, that we're not coming from a lack. We're taking from here, and we're moving it over here, and then we're taking from them, and now they don't have. That's not the consciousness we want. We want the infinite abundance of consciousness. So we're needed out in the world. The theme for this whole year is spirituality in life. We need this consciousness of infinite abundance to permeate every aspect of our life. One of the challenges, however, when we go out into the world and we see all these different perspectives and different ways of being, seeking the common good goes back to my little nephew's inquiry. What happens when what we care about is different? What happens when we have different perspectives? What do we do then? Stephen Covey, in his book, 7 Habits for Highly Effective People, one of his principles, one of the habits, was seek first to understand. That if we're going to go out into the world and meet different people, and that's what Ernest Holmes was so brilliant at, was he spent time listening and trying to understand a different perspective. The thing about taking time to understand another perspective, however, is we have to be willing to be moved by it. We are not seeking to understand another perspective just so I can give my argument back. Like I'm listening to it at the same time creating my argument of why they're wrong and why I'm right. That's not understanding. That's just using their arguments as fodder for debate, which I have to say I have enjoyed in my lifetime. There is a place where it's just play, but it doesn't go anywhere. We have to be clear that that goes nowhere, just back and forth, ping pong. And really to seek first to understand, we have to let that other perspective that seems so different from ours, we have to let it in. We have to let it into our heart. We have to let our protective, defensive walls dissolve enough to let that perspective in. And we're going to have to shift a little because of it. And that's where it gets scary. Because we feel like we lose a little of ourselves. And this is why this work is so profound. Because we think we are our beliefs. We think we are our values. As you believe, so shall it be done unto you. And I remember being in this inquiry because it really was bothering me. I'm like, well, isn't there a truth to me that's beyond what I believe? Because my beliefs can change, and so that seems very mercurial, temporary. I want to know what's real beyond beliefs. And that's key if we're going to start connecting with other people. If I feel like what I believe is who I am, that's why I'm going to defend my beliefs so strongly. Because if I have to change it, then I'm changing who I am, my core essence. And this becomes a place of disease and discord rather than healing. To allow someone else's perspective to shift me, and at the same time to realize that I am who I am, regardless of what they believe, becomes the ultimate freedom. The paradox of all spiritual life is that there's one power, one presence, and yet each of us is a unique emanation of that. But we are not unique because we make ourselves unique. It's not our ego that is unique. See, our ego wants to say, I'm separate than you, I'm special, or I'm different because of my story, because of my personality, and I'm identified with my personality. When we are identified with our personality, we're coming from a place of smallness and finiteness. That in fact, when we start shifting our identity, it's not that our ego or small self goes away, but we shift our identity to our infinite self, that natural uniqueness pours forth. Nothing that we've created is not limited by personality, but we are not, that uniqueness is not of us. We didn't create it. It's not because we have purple hair or we have this really weird Myers-Briggs code or cool Enneagram number. That's not what makes us unique. What makes us unique comes from pure spirit. And the deeper we go and realize that, we become freer and freer. We don't have those borders of protection start to dissolve. We don't need to defend ourselves. Our sense of humor comes out, our lightness of being. That's why so many spiritual teachers you see laugh a lot, because they're not really that invested in this personality stuff. They can laugh at themselves, they can laugh at life, because they're not that invested into a core identity, and if it gets rocked, they fall apart. One of my first experiences of this was, strangely, with on our ministers' listserv in the early 2000s. So email came around, I think, in the late 1900s, in the 1990s, and we're all getting used to it. I became a minister in 2000, but somewhere along the way, this is the ministers of the United Center for Spiritual, whatever, I don't know. There's so many name changes. We're starting to realize that we could have discussions about what we believe online. Now, if you've given your life to something, okay, you've given my money, my energy, most people who go into ministry don't think of it as a job that you come and go to, it's your life. So the assumption is, so it's very personal. My point with that is it's very personal. The assumption is that if you've given your life to this teaching, that your colleagues have also given their lives, and we're basically all going to be together. That's the place where I belong. And what was discovered on this minister's listserv is that people have very different ideas of what that meant. And it became very emotional to people because it's personal, and I thought this was the place where I could feel safe. These were my people, and now I don't feel safe. That is the key. I hear it all the time. I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe with this group of people. I don't feel safe in this situation because they have a radically different point of view, and it's a place where I can no longer be open with my heart. And in fact, there was a lot of aggression on a listserv of people who feel nothing but oneness. It was quite paradoxical because people were feeling personally attacked. And they were sometimes. People would get angry that someone had another perspective, and they would be angry. So, but people hung in there. That's what I love. That's what I love when we're in this teaching, is that people said, I feel like I can't even be on this listserv anymore. Or I can't say what I think without being attacked. I get a lot of private emails attacking me and telling me blah, blah, blah. So there became this evolution of how can we do this without hurting one another? And I got to see how it evolved. It was beautiful. And I also was evolving. So I would just, to make one, there were many arguments about many different things, just like, do you swear or not swear? Just little things. Words matter. No, they don't. Yes, they do. No, and they were always very deep and interesting. I always I'm terrible because I get totally engaged in these things, and I just, what do I think? So one of them is what I would say is on the listserv there were two groups in this particular area where one group was very traditional religious science. This teaching, Centers for Spiritual Living, teaches religious science, which was created by Ernest Holmes back in the 1920s, Science of Mind textbook, and created an institution, and these have principles that we teach. One power, one presence. We are each one with it. There's only one life, one power. And we can use this law of creation to create the reality we want. He has a whole series of books and teachings, and we have classes, and they were very clear that that was the purpose of our centers, was to teach these principles of science of mind. Then there was another group. They weren't limited to agape, but I'll just call it the agape group. Because agape, which is also, it was a Centers for Spiritual Living years ago, Reverend Michael, who's the minister, almost never talked about religious science as a thing. We still had their classes. So nobody from that community really identified as a religious scientist per se. When you went to agape, you were very clear you were there for God. You were there for the infinite love intelligence of the universe in all of its forms, in all of its modalities, in all of its teachings. So there felt to us this unlimited possibilities. And so it felt, and I say us because that's the road I identified with. And then it felt like there were those who identified with religious science, and it felt small. So these battles would go back and forth about blah, blah, blah. I was also at the same time really learning integral theory. Ken Wilber, who was very similar to Ernest Holmes, looking at all these different politics, business, religion, art, how does it all fit together? And one of the main tenets of integral theory is there is truth to every perspective, because the spirit is in every perspective. So I started listening from that place. And as I started saying, well, what if I just listened instead of argued for my point, which was clearly right? What if I just listened to this other perspective? And as I listened, I started to take in, I'm really getting, there's actually truth to what is being said. That it's great to be open to all the world's religions, but it waters down religious science. And religious science has a very definite practice that is incredibly valuable to this world. And if we just sort of dissipate it into all this, it's all everything, it's all God, and it's all just love, and it's all peace, and there's no clear definition of what religious science offers, we are doing a disservice to religious science. So I started to understand the other perspective and started to have to take it into my being. It changed me. It allowed me to recognize that the walls that I have were my own personality and ego. And so there was one person in particular who we would have these interactions, and they were very traditional religious science. And at the beginning, I didn't particularly care for this. I'll just use one person because it's easier, person. And so but as I was really listening and hearing, we took our conversation offline and really started having deep communication. And suddenly this healing happened where I really saw her, and I knew she saw me. Seek first to understand that all these ideas of separation, they're humanly created. They are humanly created. They are not real. I still got to be me. She still got to be her. I didn't lose myself. I didn't lose this individual expression of how I am in the world. She did not lose her individual expression of how she is in the world. We just gained this deep value and appreciation for one another and support for each other. So then back on the minister's listserv, I would support her perspective and say, this is actually a really important point we need to hear. And we need to start shifting because of that. Who do we want to be as a community and as an organization? How can we be both and? How can we move from either or to both and, where we include all the different perspectives? This is seeking common ground. Oh, and by the way, at this point, and it was a period of my life where I really liked to be provocative too, so I would poke too. But what I learned was that in order to provoke, we need to go in these long discussions of listening. So I was spending a lot of time on the minister listserv, and out of the blue, I got a check for $800 from home office saying I was making the organization better. But that came from listening and time and attention and being willing to change and willing to hear and still being unique. I think our greatest fear with all of this seek the common good is that I will lose myself and I will lose my good. And Ernest Holmes kept bringing that home. That is impossible. It is impossible when we know who we really are to ever lose our good and our own individual expression of spirit. Nobody can take that away. Everyone else can have their good, and I will not take away from my good and from my way of expression. So we begin always with our own self, with our own, not just with our own needs, but with our own identity. Who am I really? I love your song this morning. Who am I really? All these forms changes. Even our beliefs change. Who am I underneath all of these temporary things? That is this profound spiritual journey in which we're all on. We continue to do that work, and then we can really go out into the world and hear and feel into other people. So we go back to our heaven scenario with the person who loves the tiger and the person who hates the tiger. The person who loves the tiger really understands and learns from the person who doesn't like the tiger and can be much more respectful of how, not sort of like, what an idiot, they don't like tigers, and I'm gonna let my tiger run around wherever it wants to, too bad. You know, that would be sort of a us versus them versus I care deeply about my neighbor now. I've heard their heart, I've heard their feelings, I'm gonna be deeply respectful, and the neighbor has heard the other perspective and said, though I don't care for it in my space, I'm happy not to have a tiger, but I'm happy for their joy. And we start to be happy for each other's goodness, even though it may look different than ours. And that's genuine happiness. When we praise and give thanks for other people's good, that's our good too, even if it looks different, because we recognize in the infinite goodness of the universe. Everything is about bringing us home to the both and, to the good that is ours and to other people. Seeking the common good starts with us, but it absolutely needs to be stretched out to everyone around us. We don't want to live in a world by ourselves. We can't live in a world. We live in a world with not just people, but animals and plants, that everything is made in the image and likeness of pure spirit. And the more I listened to a talk this morning, I never heard, the person, the Centers for Spiritual Living is following the 10 prophetic law justice principles. And the gentleman who created them, I didn't ever think about who he was, but someone sent out a video and said, you need to start watching these YouTubes. So I watched it this morning, and his level of compassion for other people and what he kept saying, and we see it in Ernest's home so clearly, when we care deeply about other people and their good, it brings us so much joy. Our good becomes deeper, wider, higher, freer, the more we care about other people. It doesn't take away from us. It adds to us. It deepens us in who we are. So it's this constant work. It's also someone who says, don't wait till you've done all your healing work before you help other people, because in helping other people, you're doing your own inner work. It's this constant dynamic. We're one. There's no separation. And as we continue to see the wholeness and the perfection of pure spirit in everything and everyone, we see miracles everywhere around us. We see amazing things happen because we're the vehicles. And this is what seeking the common good is. The beginning and the end, and everything in between, is anchored in this one power and this one presence. This presence. So let us just feel this presence today, that even as we're using words, if we can tap into that which is beyond words, we may feel it within us. We may even feel it next to us, above us or below us. There's no space or time in the presence, so we may experience it whatever way we experience it. But it is beyond time and space. It is beyond all time and all space. So we think of the beginning of time, the Big Bang Theory. We think of 30,000 years in the future. We think of all the different spatial elements, the billions and billions of stars, the atoms, the grains of sand. All of this is time and space. And to recognize pure spirit is beyond all of it. It transcends all dimensions of time and space. And so we allow our consciousness simply to be free, to be absolutely free, in that which knows no limitation, that which is never bound by time, by past precedent, that is never limited by what has gone before. And what a miracle to know that we are that consciousness now, that infinite presence that can be experienced right here and right now, within us, around us, is who we are. That is the truth of who we are. We are each and every one of us, this one power and this one presence that is transcendent, that is transcendent, that is transcendent of all time and all space. And what a miracle it is to know that not only is this infinite consciousness who we are, that it is unique. This invisible, infinite presence is unique as a perfect idea as each and every one of us in this room, as each and every all life. It is absolutely unique. It is never repetitive. There's no snowflake that is like another snowflake. There's no raindrop that is like another raindrop. There's no person that is like another person. Our minds cannot humanly conceive that. And yet that which is beyond time and space creates this effortlessly in every breath. And what a gift it is to be one of these unique creations. May we open our hearts and appreciate and value that each of us are one of these magnificently unique creations right now. There's nothing that we need to do. There's nothing we need to change. There's nothing we need to fix. There's nothing we need to make happen. There's nothing we need to think about. It already exists. Our uniqueness already exists. Our uniqueness as the infinite eternal one already is there, and that uniqueness has all that it needs. It is already whole, perfect, and complete. All the resources necessary for this beautiful, unique expression of pure spirit is ours here and now. We do not need to grab it from anything external. It is right within us as our consciousness sees and knows and feels it. And as we know this for our life, we know this for all life forms, sentient life forms on this planet Earth and all the cosmos. that the infinite goodness of God is already existence in, through, and as all creation. Those places where there is great suffering within our own life, within our friend's life, within the world and the planet, we know and hold that consciousness of wholeness, that consciousness of goodness is right there available. And we are here, each and every one of us, to continue to call and activate that goodness forward in our consciousness, through our words, through our activity, through our actions, within our own life, within our family's life, within our community's life, and within this world's life as spiritual citizens of the cosmos. We are saying yes to the power of pure spirit pouring through us and allowing ourselves to be vehicles of this infinite good here and now and always. In every situation and circumstance, we are here to be the wonderful speakers and activators of this infinite good for all life forms. We reject nothing. We are for everything. We are for spirit as everyone. Everyone's good. Everyone is included. Every life form. No separation. There is enough good, infinite good, more than enough good, pouring through all creation in every moment. We bask in this abundance of good. We bask in who we are. We are the common good, individually and collectively. And as we consciously know this, we know that we have changed the planet this very moment through this awareness. For this healing light and this healing consciousness and this healing presence, I say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, God. Thank you, God, as each and every one of us. And we release this word now into the lull of life, knowing that as we have spoken this word, it is already done. And we say together as one. And so it is. Amen and amen.